I am Kathleen Cohen. I'm a tech humanist. What's a tech humanist? A tech humanist is like spending my entire life career half in a traditional analog world and now half in a digital, interactive, integrated media and immersive world. And I have my own business called the Collaboratorium. We focus on three areas. We focus on client engagement that run across many verticals, typically LBE themed attractions, architecture, as well as real estate and retail. And second area of the Collaboratorium is speaking. Every year I do a new theme for a new talk, and this year's theme is the future and present have converged, and that I'll be giving tomorrow. Super excited. And the third part of the Collaboratorium is research and development. So there's a tremendous arm that looks at the sociology, the cultural anthropology of where we are in this world between today and 2045 as a futurist and as a visionary. So super excited to be here and to present to you this fabulous panel of three wonderful women in the XR industry. So, Cathy Hackl, it is so great to have you here and on this panel. I'm super excited about being able to talk about where we started last year at the Arrayas and where we are currently with COVID and what life looks like for you. But before we get into that, which we'll do one-on-one, can you just do an intro of yourself and what you're up to?
Thank you, Kathleen. I'm happy to be here in a virtual way. Totally fine. Just really excited because I'm very passionate about the areas. So my name is Cathy Hackl. I am a futurist first and foremost. That's my biggest passion. Like I said, I'm a futurist. I'm also been working in the AR, VR space for the last 5 years with companies like HTC Vive, Magic Leap, AWS, and several other companies. And yeah, I just been very active in the space. Over the last year, I've also been doing a lot of writing, and I know we're going to be getting into that. I'm a contributor for Forbes as well. It's where I write about everything future for them, mostly with AR and VR, but those sorts of things. I'm an author as well, and just an exciting time to be part of the industry. I'm also based in Washington, D.C., which I think is very relevant because I feel quite lucky to be in this area as AR and VR grow. And I'm part of the people boots on the ground, let's say, with helping push conversations related to policy and XR, and also educate people on Capitol Hill here in the United States, the government, about AR and VR and how it can be used for retraining, for visualization of data, everything, you name it. Just exciting time to be in DC for that.
Emily Olman, you are OG. You are like OG Arrayas, and I'm so happy to have you. And you are our ambassador. You are our link to the community. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself for folks that have never been to the Arrayas, and those that have been there will definitely hear it again.
Thank you, Kathleen. And yeah, my name is Emily Olman, and I am the Arraya ambassador and community chair. It is true, I am an OG Arraya attendee and jury member. So I've been there since the very beginning, and I live in the Bay Area. When I'm not promoting and evangelizing for XR in the work that I do with XR communities such as Onite and the Arrayas, I actually am the CEO of a company called Hopscotch Interactive. We are pushing the medium forward for XR for real estate. So I've been doing that for over 5 years. And so I'm a real estate photographer and virtual tour expert. I consult on XR different initiatives for commercial and residential real estate. So my passion is really in the built environment. Of course, what's exciting about the Arrayas is that everybody is coming together at Europa Park or virtually like we are doing this year to bring together like-minded community members and to talk about the things that we've been doing over the last year, and then what we're going to be doing in 2021 and what's different and how the impact of this year has affected us. So that's me.
Amy Jupiter, I am so happy to have asked and you said yes to include you on this panel of amazing women. And I love our banter back and forth about this immersive world versus what you've done for so long in your career in traditional themed attractions and VFX and who you are in the industry. So why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself to a community you don't even know yet, but you're beginning to know a little bit about us.
Hi, I'm Amy Jupiter. I'm a visual effects supervisor. I most recently was an executive producer at Walt Disney Imagineering, where I was an experienced designer. I worked at image-based storytelling. I most recently worked on Avatar, Flight of Passage, and Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout, both of them at Walt Disney theme parks. And I describe myself as a storyteller who uses integrated technology to basically hack your propriocetic systems. So propriocetic hacker is what I do for the most recent iteration of my living. And I'm glad to be here.
The title of this talk, which purposefully I had thought about and thought storytellers as essential workers. And you have been so immersed in being a futurist about where we are headed in our future. But my talk on the stage tomorrow is going to be the future and the present converged. And you're living that as a futurist. We just got immersed right into this world. So can you just first talk about what your perspective is on what just happened with COVID in your futurist world?
Yeah, and thanks, Kathleen. Thanks for asking that question. So this is really interesting because as a futurist, people always hear futurist and they're not sure what to think. They think futurists make predictions. And yeah, we might make some predictions here or there, but what we're doing are making projections. We're looking at all the weak signals and emerging trends and trying to better understand what are the potential futures that lay ahead. So if you think through what we've just experienced, a lot of people in the strategic foresight or futurism community, we knew that this was coming. Like for a lot of people, are like, this is a black swan event. Not really. There was lots of information, lots of different signals indicating that this was potentially going to happen. Some things were getting out of line with the environment or with other things. And so it wasn't necessarily like a total black swan. Black swans are really difficult. So from a strategic foresight perspective, what I have seen is this acceleration into understanding that in order to be more resilient when it comes to things that are uncertain, when it comes to uncertainty, volatility, you need to really think through the future and have a futurist mindset of sorts. So I'm actually, during this whole process of living through this pandemic, I've been thinking through what are some of the things that leaders in the future are going to need to become better leaders and better managers. And when you think about it, you read a lot about emotional intelligence and emotional intelligence being incredibly important for business relationships, for managing people, for being a mom or what have you. And I really think that in some ways, what I call futures intelligence is slowly becoming as important as emotional intelligence when it comes to leading people into getting to that next level of business. Because if you're only thinking about the next quarter as a business leader, not thinking about the next quarter century, you're missing something there.
Yeah, what that makes me think about is the Aureas and Europa Park and the Mac community have coined a phrase, comfortainment, and what the future of entertainment and conferences might look like. And for those of us that are visionaries and futurists and live in a world that's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years ahead, and like I said, COVID collapsed those worlds, how do you see this sort of idea of entertainment, conferences, virtual reality, immersive worlds? How do you see that playing out in the next couple of years? What is that going to look like as we come out in the next 6 months, allegedly, of COVID, and what the next 5 years looks like?
Yeah, so when I think about the long-term horizon, and I think through what is it going to look like in the future, the first word, just when you were asking the question that comes to mind is metaverse. Mm-hmm. So the concept of this metaverse, of this machine readable world that's likable, clickable, searchable, in some ways where humans meet the machines in reality, like that's where we're going to see the same things and communicate in this 1-to-1 3D map of the world. So I think about that and I think about how does that change the way we meet or the way we do conferences? And I think that's where I think Mac Media is onto something with that term. Because right now we're consuming a lot of content on flat screens. The world is full of flat screens, whether it's my phone or whether it's my computer or my TV. But once we break free from those screens and we wear glasses, I used to work for Magic Leap, so very, very experienced in that sense, is do I really want to have all these potentially flat looking screens in front of me? Is that really the future of content? So you need to think through that. If you stop and look around, if in alt space or whether it's the real world and you look around, everything is 3D or volumetric, it has volume. So when we move on from whatever comes after the mobile phone into potentially glasses or contact lenses or what happens, or we really want our content to be flat. No, we're going to want it to be volumetric. So I think that's where there's an element there, and definitely Mac Media is onto something with that term.
Yeah, the Mac Media, along with Mac Next, which Mac Next had just announced their division of Europa Park and the Mac family, as Mac Next being the innovators moving forward. So as Mac Next and Mac Media deal with conference entertainment as well, and how do you advance that, those two back of the house departments and business units also will be discussing that same vision. How do you prepare for that on the back end, and what's the user experience? So with that, do you imagine everybody's going to be wearing some kind of light gear in the next 5 years in order to be in volumetric space? What's your opinion coming from the Magic Leap goggles and or now what the precedence is moving forward?
I don't know if everyone's going to be wearing glasses in 5 years. I think there's from an infrastructure standpoint, you still need a lot of different things to happen for everyone, or a massive penetration to happen. When I tell people, when people tell me, what year is it that it's going to happen? I was like, it's this decade, sometime this decade, but there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to happen. What I will say, and the message that I've been sharing with a lot of different people, is that all of us that are working in AR and VR, volumetric, whatever it is, we're all in some ways kind of creating the printing press of the future. Because how are we going to retain memories? How are we going to tell history? Books, I think books will be around still for a very long time, but in reality, it's like, how are we going to tell these stories in a totally different way? If you look at what's happened with photography, it's changed, it's evolved, it's still photography. But in reality, it's like, how are we going to tell stories in the future? How are we going to retain that information? That's one of the reasons that I'm personally working with a volumetric capture studio here in DC called Avatar Dimension to create one of the world's first volumetric capture historical preservation programs. So the idea is to use volumetric video to capture not only people and their stories, but also dances, languages. It's about heritage, and it's about retaining this information, because I see museums, I see universities as kind of repositories of this 3D content, of this future way we'll share stories.
I love that so much. Last year, I talked about likeness and legacy and the land rush, with everybody jockeying to recreate your human, your digital human. And where you're taking that is exactly how I feel as a tech humanist, where I envision people like you need to be shepherding this message. So I'm so excited about what it means to capture somebody's legacy today versus who they were in their best representation of themselves. So I'm going to have hours of conversation with you about that. It's super, super exciting. I know I wanted to share with you, you had mentioned direct avatars in the metaverse, and we covered a little bit about it, and storytellers as essential workers. Do you want to talk a little bit about your book and what you are intending for that?
Yeah. So my book, The Augmented Workforce, How AI, AR, and 5G Will Impact Every Dollar You Make, it's really a book for leaders. It's a book for people that are interested in understanding how these technologies impact different sectors, how they can prepare. In the book, we have a framework that people can start using if they want to. We also have a chapter with commandments to follow, but it's really looking at technology, not so much from replacing workers. I think people always over-index on that. The robots are coming, they're going to take all our jobs. And we don't want to be naive saying that there's not going to be job replacement, because automation is leading to job replacements. That's very true. But we also come to look at technology more as something that complements the worker and allows the worker to do maybe a job that they weren't ready to do, or that they had to get upskilled a lot. It took a long time to upskill and do. So we look at technology more as that augmentation of the workforce. So yeah, I'm really excited about the book, and I hope some people will be interested in checking it out.
Can we check the book out in 360?
We're working on some fun stuff for the book launch, so maybe not 360, but some AR.
I know, but my attitude about future books is that we should be able to feel the book with all of our senses. Like the end game is all of our senses are lit up, and this is Amy. We're going to dovetail right into you about proprioceptive environments and who we are in our worlds and how we retain information. Cathy, look forward to more Q&A with you and everybody in the community. Thank you so much. And I know we're going to have fun on the jury. Emily, first off, I have watched you evolve in when I first met you to where you are today in taking on immersive worlds like a rock star. And what I have seen you do in your participation in the VR AR Association, what you've done with AWE, what you've done with the community, what you've done in standing up your own company, two of them, as a matter of fact, and looking at spatial and really taking on the word spatial computing and saying, how does that relate to a marketplace? So you are no stranger to actually being a maker in this space. And between you and me and the world, makers have what has gotten us through this COVID moment. The storytellers, the artists, the makers, that has what's carried everybody's spirit. So like I said, you're no stranger to this conversation. So maybe you can talk about the last 9 months and how that's informed what you're currently doing and how you believe it's going to look post-COVID.
Absolutely. And I think that spatial computing is where we are heading, and it's what we know that the things that we make will be enabling for sure. I am a 3D photographer. I am a person that creates volumetric content. I use that to create high-end virtual tours and virtual experiences. And so for me, so much of this has been about that teleportation, that taking somebody somewhere they haven't been before. And what we saw over the last 9 months was that I've been doing this since 2015. And so being somebody who was very early to try to promote this and to get other people excited about it. And we had the sort of the dam break in a way, because all of a sudden in 2020, people who were like, this was something that I didn't need to have, it was really optional prior to the pandemic, became something that was essential. And so my whole world shifted, everybody's world shifted. I had always been rolling up my sleeves and going in and trying to create things that I knew would help people. But in this sense, like, I was able to go in, create virtual tours, enable people to keep doing their work. And it was intense in the beginning because we didn't know anything. We were making it up as we went along. Were we allowed to go in to shoot properties? Were we able to go on location? How many people could be there? Who could I send in? I could only send in myself in the beginning because I was terrified of sending in anybody else because of the liability. So I just think that it's been, now that we have created also so much, we've scanned a lot, we've created a lot of 3D content. This is now waiting for the next sort of phase of, we created the content, our clients know they need this stuff, and now we can use it to create more things that we've already always known were possible. But there's, I think, going to be a much more receptive audience for it moving forward, because they get it now, and they get that they get that it's essential. So that's a big difference.
Yeah, I have gotten so many calls that have been, Kathleen, this is what you've been doing all these years? We've never could figure out, what do you do?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, now the world has finally met us. And now the world we can have a conversation with as far as what is a way to engage. So what do you imagine the next 6 months? Do you imagine the next 6 months being the roaring 20s, or do you imagine 2022 or 2024 being the roaring 20s of how we relate now with these new mediums?
Oh gosh, in terms of the timing of it, I still feel like I would say like mid 2021 will be, it's seasonal too. Like, we still have to get through the spring. It's not even been a year. And I think that once we've had a little bit of hindsight, I think we'll be able to go back and go, okay, wow, what are we going to do? How do we make a difference for the next year for ourselves? And so I do think that, like, roaring 20s, maybe more, for example, with commercial real estate and virtual tours, which is one of the things that I've been focusing a lot on. I just think that it's like, there have been so many people that are just trying to keep things even and haven't been trying to necessarily push the medium. All of these immersive storytellers are going to be ready for that next moment because we've been anticipating it. And so it's like having those kinds of conversations with people, I think, over the next few months will lead to, I hope, very exciting things: volumetric capture, photogrammetry, digital twins, not just of ourselves, but a lot of digital twinning of the physical and the built environment. Because this is an insurance policy now. This is not something that you can live without. In fact, some of the conversations that I had early on, people were calling me saying, our production stopped mid-production. And so I think what's going to happen is things like, there won't be a production in the future without a digital twin created of that location in order to be that insurance policy. So I just see more and more need after people have been through this sort of first wave of seeing how essential it is.
Your work is gorgeous. I actually show people, can you imagine using this for your business? Because this is how good your work is as far as the quality of your work, letting people inside for real estate, letting people inside homes and seeing your 360, but it's a feeling. And it's very different when you walk into a property versus what you're capturing in immersive 360, which is, I guess my question to you, is it one and the same? Do you feel like you can capture exactly what the feeling is when you walk into a property and you're recreating that for an asset for a realtor? What goes into your thought process when you're trying to recreate that?
It's so many people that make that moment possible, even for me to go in and capture it as well as I do. Quite honestly, it's like the work of many hands, right? It's the stager, it's the time of day we go to capture a feeling. It's making sure that we focus in on certain elements that can give you emotion. I think that you can't tell somebody what the breeze is going to feel like unless we're really trying to capture all those senses, but as best we can help people to get a feeling. And it's funny because one of the things that I've noticed is like when I, for instance, go into VR or look at AR experiences of places, it's a place that I've been before, like it's actually brought me to tears in the past. Like I've had a real emotional connection to places that I can't go to or I've been to, and it's a real feeling. But to have that same thing happen for a place you've never been to, that is the part that I keep thinking about and I keep working on, because I think we can get closer. We can get really close. There's still a lot that has to come together, I think, in the future for us to be able to truly do that.
I'm going to ask you one last question because it's sparking a thought, which is you've been on the leadership side as well of the community with Ravra, with your community efforts and what you've been doing with the Aureas. How do you see this capturing feeling translating to what's necessary in our community as it expands? And we're inviting so many people to the table right now.
Yeah.
So many people don't have to have this background in order to play.
Yeah.
What message do you feel you need to shepherd in inviting this community to grow?
Yeah, I think that it is the way that I've felt about it from the beginning. And as you mentioned, like I've evolved from starting really basically just out of a passion for this myself. And so I do understand the grassroots DIY, build something mentality. And it's very similar to the same way I feel about how people have approached COVID and how they've approached this time during the pandemic and their work. And it's there's no wrong way. It's do something, try something is better than don't do anything, and be involved in whatever way you can. And I think with community, it's we often get people wanting to break into this community who are like, how do I get started? What do I do? And I was like, oh my gosh, you don't know. There's so many people that are they're really just welcoming you. This community is that's one of the things that drew me in the very beginning, was that I felt like it was a complete sort of blank slate for creating connections, and there was nobody who really seemed to be like the expert. So it was like, if there's experts, but we can all bring something new and we can all bring something to the conversation. So that's what I liked about it. I felt like it was democratizing an industry that was going to be important into the future.
Yeah. Super excited. I know you'll be in the QA session after this as well. And also when we do a 30-minute networking session, that hopefully you'll be able to continue to be an ambassador for the community and welcome people into AltSpace. So that'll be fun when we get there. So thank you so much. And we'll be in QA. Amy Jupiter, you have contributed so much in your career. And I love how you've weighed in on both Cathy and Emily. And your career has taken such a big trajectory as well, since you are old school VFX to how you look at themed attractions, how you look at guests, how you look at an experience from a flat screen to a 360. What are all the feels and the feelings that go with it? And you've worked with such amazing people, and you're heavily decorated. I know this in the industry just because I was at the VFX. I was at the VFX last year. Although I don't know if was it, you were not awarded last year. It was the year before that. You did get an award for what?
Yeah, they were just back. Again, it's fortunate for timing. It really is. It's fortunate for timing. You get this amazing last 7 years of a run. And
so what's the last 7 years been like in your career? Or take a pass at sharing like what the industry started as for you and where it is today. And what does that mean for you?
It doesn't feel really any different, because I started out hiding in a special format camera department while I had an internship when I was in college. And so the special format cameras that Emily was talking about earlier, I am stereography, but I've made sort of multi-sensory experiences since I started in this industry. But the past 7 years, as we have gotten a democratization of technology and put technology into the hands of many people, and also using a lot of off-the-shelf technology to then put it together in a way that hasn't been done before. And so you look at the attractions that we're really reimagining formats, reimagining the same type of formats, like reimagining Soren as flying over Pandora. And so that, but then bringing so much more into the theater. You have taking everything that existed in the Tower of Terror and then saying, how much of it can we use now? And reimagining it as Guardians of the Galaxy. I think reimagining over the last 9 months of reimagining our lives, like looking back at my career, a lot of it is taking my current iteration, is just taking things I've learned in the past, or even from the Lumiere brothers from 1900s and projecting on the inside of a balloon, which to me seemed like VR. It seems like the inside of a big hot air balloon. They put their projectors on the inside of that, and it was a new format, but and immersive. When we talk about immersive, it really is like getting a big hug. And so my job about understanding the guest experience is really how to touch them, how to bridge the volumes, how to move them and move them. And that's, I think, what I study as a human being, what emotionally affects me. And then how you can take all these disparate systems that are just motion entities and make emotional entities out of them. And I think that is really what storytelling, how do you grab the attention of others so that we can survive as a species? How do we work together? I cannot hear.
I know, I'm on mute half the time. On mute, off mute. It's the phrase of 2020. You're on mute. You can hear me now. Okay. So this idea of the future and the present converging, what does that now mean you feel like you have to focus? Do you feel like you need to amp up in VR and AR? Do you still keep some common anchor principles of how you have and create a feeling for people? What do you think may have to change for you or might not change at all?
I don't think storytelling ever really changes. I think that the thing that grabs you as a human being and makes you feel what you hear, I don't really feel like I will approach things any differently. I will probably, no, as far as touching and feeling and clean, I think I've always really want to wash my hands a lot anyway. But I definitely feel like it hasn't really, I've doubled down on humanity and connection.
Mhm.
I don't think for me, I've always been a person who wants to make technology disappear. I think that all the walls, the things that separate us, I want to bring together in a theater.
Mhm.
If you look at the traditional ways that we story tell, even if you're looking at a static big painting like the theater, you sit
Mhm.
in the way that used to reveal large pieces of art,
Mm.
or a Frederick Church painting or a Bruegel or a Bosch. You take it to a big space, you open the curtains and you sit there and look at the moments.
Mhm.
And whether you extrude the moments so they're volumetric, and I tell the story, I look at this, I point your eyes here, I point your eyes here. I
Mhm.
don't really feel like I'm sitting there and you're telling me the story is any different or than me looking at different moments. It's my order. The other way would be I tell you the order in which you look at things. So
Can I weigh in on that though? Because AI is going to play a big part of this. When we look at how algorithms are going to inform a smart environment, and that's going to now have a voice and a tone that we may or may not be able to create while we're building these experiences, we're weighing in a new vector and a new opportunity to have not just data and inform us about what's going on in a space, but and Emily, also in real estate, when you've got smart environments that are knowledgeable, that have a voice, that have their own opinion, where lights could dim or environments could change mood, or you have an environment that's going to be smart, whether we, as a designer, Amy, I would imagine that you are going to play the orchestrator in that role?
It really depends. I think it's so postural, right? You're like, I'm either going to lean forward into it, or I'm going to lean back and receive it. And I think that like I think that probably in what I imagine, you can go into all modes of actively engaging, where it's your plot. I am going to move my camera to the different moments, or I'm going to sit back and let somebody else tell me how they see it through. I've had series, like TV series navigated for me, so that the thread that someone else wanted me to pull out of it, they presented to me in their order of this cinematic universe. You've heard, like, when we were talking about Star Wars, everybody had an idea of what order it was. And that felt like an active interactive, someone's not intelligence, bringing intelligence to this. I often, artificial intelligence, it's all from us. It's all from us, right? Our associations, whatever the intelligence that gave all of the cues, or what I would do, what I would roll, what sequence I would play things in, how I would respond, what my synaptic transmissions would do. It's like a game of pachinko. I think it's choreographed though. And you could go from either direction, whether like I'm pushing it towards you or I'm pulling it towards you. That data node, and it's branching into a constellation. And whether I navigate, like I'm interested in drilling down or sitting back and seeing what its relationship is. I really do this about relationship and the dualities or the multiplicities of relationship. And relativity.
I love that you're a proprioceptive hacker. That title says volumes of what we're about to head into as far as man and the machine merging, and what that begins to look like. And that's a long shot view as a futurist of where we're going to be by 2045. So thank you. I thought that was fantastic. I can go hours and hours with your view into the world.
I just have one question for both of you. Do you believe that any of this takes away our humanity, or the way we interact with it, or dehumanizes it? Because I keep hearing a lot of things that want to separate us from the computer. And I really like the embracing of this as a way to connect more with more of us, who we are as humans. Seems like the way you guys both approach this.
Well, Emily, I'm just going to say one quick thing, which is, had HCI not been its own division in universities of human-computer interaction and how we relate, this age-old question has been up for debate forever and ever. And the mere fact right now that all these AI engineers are looking at ROI, looking at rewards based for gaming, looking at ways in which we can keep going down a rabbit hole to unearth, even in a social dilemma, places of a human being that haven't been unearthed, has missed the point on the behavioral psychology, the sociology, the cultural anthropology. All of this has missed that big gap. And that's what's being unearthed right now. I want to so thank everybody for being here, for Amy, for Cathy, for Emily, for volunteering their time. And I'm super excited about seeing the submissions and our finalists for the jury's deliberation tomorrow. And I look forward to Q&A.